welcome to the Julia Monte channel. I'm very happy today to have a special guest. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte. I'm a women's fiction author, and today I have the pleasure of introducing you to author James Brown. He's written fiction and memoir. His last three memoirs were The Los Angeles Diaries, The River, a memoir, and then his latest is Apology to a Young Addict. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about himself, and then we're going to start talking about memoir and what is a memoir, what do you have to do to write a memoir, and I have a million questions for him. So we'll see what we can do within the hour that we have. All right, so Jim, I'll have you just tell me a little bit more about yourself. You can talk about fiction or just your books.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate it, the time and attention, for the last decade, maybe longer. I've been working on memoir, and the first one was called The Los Angeles Diaries. That one, all three of my memoirs have to deal with addiction, alcoholism. The first one had dealt with those issues that were related to my brother and sister, and my mother and that family. And I don't want to go into too much detail with any of the books, but basically the story is about a mother who's a criminal who gets out of prison. When she gets out of prison, she finds that her husband was having an affair. She takes her three children to Los Angeles and away from their home, 400 miles away, and begins a new life for them there. Running a lot of criminal, what would you call it? Not enterprises, games, activities, I guess is what you would say. And in the meantime, my brother and sister, she wanted us all to become movie stars. And of course, that's not how it turned out. And my brother eventually became a movie star. But it's a dark story, ultimately about suicide. My brother and sister both committed suicide. And so that's what that one's about. And then This River has more to do, again, unfortunately, with my own developing addiction, manifestations of it, and what happened there with my immediate family. That has to do with my own children and my first wife, and what happened as a result of drug and alcohol use. The third one is about, it's a trilogy, and this one has everything to do with recovery. Now that I've been sober 14 years in August, I've rebuilt my life. I have my second wife. We've been together for over 20 years. My children are healthy and happy and successful. And this book is about the good parts, the recovery, which is everything, being recovered, being sober, and having a life again, rebuilding the damage I did to the extent that I could. And it also has a lot to do with helping other addicts and alcoholics. I've gone to prisons, I've worked with prisoners, I've sponsored ex-convicts, I've sponsored other people. So the stories have everything to do with about recovery and less to do with the ravages of addiction.
Okay, yeah, and I have read all three of them, and I don't know if enjoyed is such a good word, but they were eye-opening, right? Because I know Jim is also a college professor, and that's how I met him originally. And so to read some of the painful things that you've gone through was just eye-opening, because I've been blessed not to be around that environment. My dad drank a lot, but and then I often wonder, like, did he have was he an alcoholic? Because he was able to function very well, but he did some very crazy things, and you kind of wonder, as an adult about that. But I have been blessed not to have been in those environments. So just reading your books was just really eye-opening, and it really changes, I think, the stereotype of what you think an addict, like in the last book, you have a story of an elderly couple who becomes addicted to pain medication, right?
Right.
And
Live right next door.
right next door. That's
Yep.
yeah, and it's such a sad story. It's because they gradually become addicted to this medication and end up losing everything, even their home.
Right. No,
And
it's a sad story.
yeah,
They turned it around in the end, but by then, of course, they
yeah,
were living in a little apartment at that point
yeah,
there.
yeah. But yeah, it just changes your what you think of, the stereotype of what an addict is.
Right.
Reading your books. Yeah, they're very, very.
Yeah, we come in all different forms and types, and it's not. Yeah, I had the same vision, or many years ago, not vision, but opinion. I thought all drunks and alcoholics were on Skid Row, so,
Yeah,
but it's not true. And people are definitely beginning to understand that now. You see it
yeah,
spreading across America.
yeah, yeah. Especially now with all the depression and all the people, a lot of alcohol. It's like
Yes,
with the pandemic, that was the one thing we were like all laughing about. It's like, okay, we can go to buy marijuana, we can go buy as much alcohol as we want, right? And to just sit
right.
home and get
Yeah,
dressed and drink, but we can't go like to gyms and all the things that are healthy.
I know. Yeah, the liquor stores are considered essential businesses.
Yeah, yeah. So,
It's
wow.
crazy.
Okay,
No.
so then what is a memoir? So yeah, just like
Well, again, yeah, that's tough because
yeah,
the memoir has evolved over time. The easiest way to define it is to compare it to an autobiography. And an autobiography typically deals with usually it's a celebrity's life or a major political figure. Um, and we begin when they were born, and we follow them as they grow up, and we follow them into their careers, into their accomplishments, into the obstacles that life threw their way that they overcame, and we get a good portrait of the individual from the time he was born to the time which he wrote the memoir, where it ends. At a certain point in his career, usually people write them at the end of their careers. Whereas a memoir is a little different. You oftentimes will follow a theme. So my particular memoirs dealt with alcohol and drug addiction. Other people write memoir dealing with maybe being gay and coming out. There usually seems to be a theme between them in a memoir, but there may not in an autobiography. And in a memoir too, memoir deals with selective events, whereas instead of following a linear path, a memoir may, in some cases, jump from one point to another in a non-sequential way. So, I guess those are since I'm a professor, I pontificate forever. But that's essentially the differences. One other thing I'll say, and I'll be quiet, is the modern memoir now incorporates fictional techniques. That is, oftentimes the modern memoir now will use dialogue that may or may not have been spoken because memory is fallible and we can't remember back 30 years. It may include details of setting to give us a sense of the place. And many of those details hopefully will be true. Some may not be. The day in which the story occurred may not be. You may say it happened on a warm summer night, when in fact it was a cold, winter. And so you may get some of the little surface level facts wrong.
yeah.
But what we're after there in the current memoirs is emotional truth. Is what people will tell you.
Okay. And so is that considered okay not to be factual? So it doesn't have to be completely true?
Yes, that's a big question, and it's one that memoirs wrestle with. And some are very strict with their notion of memoir and do their very, very best to make sure they have all their facts correct. And they'll interview people and they'll hear their versions of a particular story and say, "Well, is that how it happened? But I remember it happening this way." Um, so some people take that approach, and then others will say, "You know what? As long as I'm true to major events in my life, I can't remember all the details, but I know there's a story here. So I am going to fit." I am going to lie a little bit. I am going to make up some things. But at the heart of the story, everything I'm telling you is true.
Okay. Yeah, that's what is tough when I read, memoirs, and I wonder sometimes. It's like, okay, did this really happen exactly like this? Because how do they remember exactly, like you're saying,
Right.
dialogue or but yeah, it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
As a fiction writer,
Right.
I like the fictional aspect of it, but I would, if I had to write my own memoir, I think I would really, really struggle with that, because I would wonder, like, okay, well, I don't really remember exactly how it happened. So what do I do?
Right.
Do I make it
Yeah.
up? Yeah.
That's sadly, the modern memoir is not all the time factually accurate. These are
Yeah.
smaller details,
Yeah.
because like I said, memory is fallible. The further
Yeah.
we go back into our past, the less we can remember.
Yeah.
And then also, the way you experience an event, and then say you go interview a friend that was there with you when it happened. He says, "Oh, no, it didn't happen like that at all." And
Right.
now what are you supposed to do? You go with, "But I'm certain it happened this way." He goes, "No, you're off. You're completely off."
Yeah.
And then so what do you do with that case there? You've got to, I think you pretty much have to stick to your guns as you imagine that you experience the event.
Yeah. It's
And
kind of like, it's your truth. It's what you remember and what you experienced and what you felt, right?
yeah, it is your truth. I don't want to use that term too freely because people are using that freely. Now, your truth is different than my truth. There is no factual truth. Yes, there is factual
There
truth.
is an actual truth.
There is a real truth, but when we're telling our life stories, the way we perceive life, that's
Right.
a different prism. So there, I'd say, yeah, it is our own truth, but
Right.
it's a different prism. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like how you say that it's a theme. It's that the memoir is, I guess, revolves around a theme. Because when I read it, that's what I feel like too. And I feel like when I read your books, I feel like we were talking about that I learn what it's like to be an addict. So it's around that theme, but it's even deeper than that. I think it's like I understand what it feels like, and I think that's what your book is. So all the events that you put in there makes me have that general feeling. By the time I close the book, I can say, oh, okay, now I know what it's like, or at least I know what it
right.
was like for him.
Mhm.
So I think that's a good way of understanding it, is just, making sure that there's some kind of theme around it. It's not like your whole story, your whole life story. It's centered
No,
around something.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I know that that's one of the mistakes that people make that want to write memoir, is that they think that they need to include everything, and
Yeah.
that's probably not a good idea. And you need to focus on, uh, what it is you want to say, and it is great if you can have a theme, but you can
Yeah.
also have a very interesting life and relate it. The problem sometimes can be with saying, okay, I've had a really interesting life. I'd like to tell my story. It could well be true. There'll be a lot of people who would like to read it as well, because you have literally lived an interesting life, and record needs to be made of it. But a lot of people just tell it in summary. They'll just begin to describe it as a chronicle of events,
Right.
rather than to do what you and I do,
Yeah.
which is try to create scenes,
Right.
try to make it have a sense of, give it a sense of pacing, make it a story. That's you're a storyteller. I'm a storyteller,
Right.
and our job is to be a storyteller. And so one of the mistakes that beginning storytellers make is that they will just lay it all out as it happened and throw in the kitchen sink. And you and I are people are going to say, well, no, let's stay. This is the most interesting part. Let's stick with this.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So do you have to have then, so you have to have a theme. Do you have to have I guess an issue or some kind of tragedy in your life that you are conveying in the memoir? Because I mean, we have the reason we read, I guess, is because we want to read about conflict. So if you don't have that, can you still write a memoir? What do you think?
Well, that's a big question. A good question. I think you could write the adventures of your life, and there would be nothing wrong with that. But if you have to be a darn good writer to make record of your life, you have to have something that would keep people reading, and it could be simply be the way in which you look at life. It could be very, very interesting, and you could have a great sense of humor about what's happening around you, and you could make a story out of that. But I mean, making a story that you just suggested requires conflict, and stories that lack it usually fall flat. And after a while, the reader goes, "Well, why am I reading this?" Because nothing's really happening. There's no trouble. There's no tension,
Right.
and so, but the tension can be eternal. I know that there's been books written about people trying to find themselves.
Yeah.
Wondering who they are in this crazy world that we have,
Right.
and they may decide, okay, they're going to take a hike on the Pacific Trail, and during the course of that, yeah, there was a
Yeah.
big book that did quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
About someone finding out more about themselves by virtue of testing themselves, and so yeah, that could be a grounds for memoir.
So as long as you have something that's interesting that grabs people's attention and has some kind of, I think that what you said, attention, that's a good word, because there has to be something,
Yeah.
maybe a goal, right, at the end, like for her, who was it, Cheryl Strayed?
Yes.
Yeah, she could she do it, and I think you're right, it was all that, in what was going on inside of her too, that kept you reading.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, you touched on one of the principles of plotting, which is a goal. We're going somewhere,
Yeah.
and you're taking me somewhere. So yeah, we probably in that adventure we need to go someplace.
Yeah.
And when we get to the end, we need to feel satisfied, and usually that has something to do with an interior or internal resolution of realization that
Yeah.
the author makes, and
Yeah.
that the reader makes with the author. We read it, they can identify with it. That's one of the beauties of literature is we get to identify with other people's lives and their stories, but it may be outside our experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I think the reader, as the reader's reading, the book, they're going through the same emotions that you are. So
Mhm.
that's important.
Right.
Um, okay, so let me see. What other questions do I have for you? Oh, okay. Well, okay. So this comes from being a college professor. So I've sadly been teaching like 8 years of English 101, right? So you have your basic composition, and everything seems to be an argument, right? So create an argument. You're writing an argumentative paper. Do you see memoir as that? Like, are you creating an argument? Are you leading, like with your books on addiction? Are you arguing uh, that obviously that it's not healthy and it's not good for you? But do you have an argument, or do you even look at it that way?
I'm not so sure. I look at it that way, but I'm trying to think of it that way because you've asked that question. And I do think there is a perspective. In that sense, there's an argument. My perspective is an obvious one. Drugs and alcohol are bad. We can sum it up,
um,
really narrowly. But I don't think just telling somebody they're bad is enough. I need to be having lived the experience or relived the experience the way I had, the way it happened with me. And if I can take you where I've been, at least story, you're going to get a deeper understanding. And
yeah,
so I guess in part of my journey, if there's an argument to be made, is that I want you to see what I've seen. I want you to feel what I've felt. And I think the only way I can do that is to try to recreate the moment to the best of my abilities. And there will be an argument in terms of there's a thesis, because when you get to the end of this, you're going to see, okay, now I understand why this person is the way he is.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. No, and exactly, when I was reading, like, two things actually. One thing is, I think your love of your kids and your family. Um, I could see how your original family, your birth family, led you in this to the addiction. Um, and but then I could see how your kids, your family, helped you get out of it because of your love for them and your wife. So I think there's I maybe multiple arguments that you're making, but
right?
that you can, especially your last book, you can get free of this addiction that grabs you and keeps you
Right.
imprisoned, really.
Yeah.
Life.
Yes, prison for life.
Yeah.
Um, in in recovery, a lot of people say there's only three places for people like me, and that's prison, institution, or early death.
Yeah.
That's where drug addiction always takes you.
Yeah.
It's not like you get to get off without going to prison. Not like you get to get off without going to institution. And it's not like if you keep doing what you're doing, you're not going to die because you are.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So how
so,
difficult is it for you to write about your addiction, and putting yourself back into those days?
well, uh, it it was difficult. I don't like to I don't I like to say it's difficult, that it was difficult, because I don't want to sound like a whiner. I don't want to sound like, poor me and how tortured I am and all that kind of stuff. I think those people that assume that role are guilty of self pity, and I don't want to pity myself. Everything I did, I deserve. Everything I got for what I did, I deserve. And
Yeah.
but it was hard when I was writing about people I loved who suffered from addiction. And I wrote a piece about my sister in the Los Angeles Diaries. It's, in my mind, an extended love letter to the things I could have said to her, should have said to her. And it's about her suicide. It begins with her about to commit suicide, and it ends with her committing her suicide. And in between that, what I call it, bookended. In between that, you get a good sense of her whole life as seen through my eyes. And it was because I loved her, because I lost her. And that was, we start writing about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's
And
tough.
the same with my brother. Saying I loved him too.
Yeah. 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 I could imagine that it's difficult to go. I mean, when I write fictional scenes that haven't happened, but they're sad,
Right.
I'll sit there and cry. I can imagine if they're real and it's your family. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's got to be tough. Okay, so let's see. So what I think you kind of talked about mistakes that new writers make, so that they just kind of write down just a chronicle of what happened without creating scenes. Are there any other mistakes that you think new writers make or memoir writers make that they?
Yes. Um, I just finished teaching a memoir class. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do a lot of teaching because wasn't in person. So
Yeah.
if I have anything good to offer here and there, it usually comes in little snippets here and there,
Yeah.
inspired by something that somebody's written. But over the years of teaching, for so darn many years of teaching memoir and teaching to everybody, I think one of the most common mistakes is people rush. Um, they don't linger on the moment. They don't build it. They don't make a story out of it. Going to your prom, the first, it could be the first night. Going to the prom with someone whom you ended up breaking up with later, shortly after the prom. And then maybe you meet up with her a few years later and you find that you guys have something and it clicks again. That's a story, and a love story. And you could try and write it in 5 or 6 pages, and you could, but it wouldn't be very good because I wouldn't know who she was, I wouldn't know who you are, and you didn't get to take me to the prom, or if you did, I was only there for a short while. So I think the biggest mistake that aspiring writers make when they try to write memoirs is that they rush and they feel they feel that they can compress 20 years into 10 pages or 20 pages. And you really can't. You can't do it well. You can talk about it, summarize it, but you can't really do it well. You can't make me feel what you felt. So I'll never get a feeling for your life.
Right.
So in short, I'd say slow down, and try and extract all you meaning you can from a particular scene and moment. Take your time. There's no rush.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's good advice. Yeah. The fiction writers too. I think they try to rush through and write really quickly, and it's like, wait a minute, spend some
Yeah,
time with that scene. Yeah,
right. Just skip it
great.
over all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
And one other thing I should add to is people feel the need to put people into their stories that were in real life, they were there, but they didn't really play a role. And so your mother's there, your grandfather's there, your aunt's there, your uncle's there. And you're right about your girlfriend who you broke up with the prom and met, 3 years
yeah,
later and married, right? And in the
yeah.
meantime, I've been introduced to all your family, and not a single one of them played a role. But all I care about is you and the girl, and maybe your mother. I don't know, but she played a role. You know?
Yeah, so not don't have all those extra characters in there if they didn't have anything to do with the scene. Yeah.
Right?
I think that might be
Exactly.
part of, like, you don't have to tell the whole truth. So even though they were there, they didn't matter really for the scene, then you don't need to talk about them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. That's great. Um, so do you think that so you've written now the trilogy, all centered around the theme of addiction, and you have a new one that will be released, right? It's called, is it Writing Your Way to Recovery?
It's called Writing Your Way to Recovery: How Stories Can Save Our Lives.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
That book it's my first venture into self-publishing, which I'm kind of enjoying. I kind of like the control I have over a book, and I tell
Yes.
you the truth, after all these years, I've dealt with almost all of my life major publishers, New York publishers, but I've never felt that I've been treated well. I don't think
Ah,
I was never on the top of their phone list.
right.
And I had to beg and scrap and fight to get what little I could from them. And I'm not just talking money; I'm talking about having my having a call returned. And I'm tired of agents and editors. I'm at a point in my career now where I can. It's not expensive to self-publish, and I can design my own cover, and I can promote it on the internet, and I can get it
Yeah.
all the places the major publishers can.
Right.
So I'm kind of enjoying it. But what this book is about is it's kind of a self-help book. But what I've done is I've joined and I've worked with a new friend of mine, named Patrick O'Neill, who has quite a few years of sobriety and was in the punk rock world and ended up becoming a heroin addict, an armed robber.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he did quite a few years in San Quentin. Um, and then, but he's been clean and sober. Governor Jerry Brown gave him a pardon. So his slate is quite clean, and he can vote. And he can do everything that citizen, non-felon can do. And anyway, Patrick and I know each other. He's a memoir writer. I'm a memoir writer. We decided that the creative writing played a big role in our recovery. So what we've done basically is we've taken our skills as writers and we've taken our experiences as addicts and alcoholics. We put them together and we have a book now
Hmm.
designed with a bunch of creative writing exercises, same things that I would teach in college, but with the theme of, or the slant or the subject of alcoholism and addiction.
Yeah.
And so it's not done very often. Where in recovery they talk a lot about journaling. Now we're taking journaling a step further, and we're giving it a tighter focus.
Yeah.
And so that, in a short, it's a book, self-help book, using creative writing techniques to help you recover from drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And you said you've done work at prisons, and I didn't know that he had spent time in prison too. So that might be actually a great place for
It,
for your book.
it's very possible because
Yeah.
we don't cut any corners. We don't soften anything. So it's a hard book. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not playing around. This
Yeah.
is you usually precede each exercise with a story, and it's usually not a really happy-go-lucky story. So, and then it's followed by, okay, now it's your turn.
Right.
You tell us what you did, and
Yeah. That's
and
great.
of course, there's one more level to it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That sounds fantastic. Yeah. I hope it's
thanks.
well. Yeah. Um, so after that, do you plan to go back to fiction? I don't know if you are you done with memoir, or are there other like happy stories that you want to write about?
Question. I don't know how to answer that yet. Just finished this other book up, but I've been busy trying to promote it, which I'm finding out takes a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's much heavy lifting promoting as it was writing, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
And uh, but I don't think I can go back to memoir. I think I kind of used up my past. And so maybe if I live another 20 years and have more stories to tell, then I can do one more. And so I might have to go back to fiction, or maybe try and find books that, well, I just don't know yet. I really don't know
Not
yet.
sure yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because after a while, I mean, I'm still writing fiction, but I'm also looking at expanding and saying, well, what else can I do?
Right.
Nonfiction is what I'm thinking.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. If I were to think of it, anything nonfiction.
Yeah, yeah. So very interesting. Okay, well, let's see. So just a couple more questions. One is like, what are your favorite memoirs? And do you read memoirs when you have free time? It's really hard. Like me, for example, I read fiction all the time, but I don't read women's fiction when I'm writing women's fiction.
Yeah.
I don't want the I guess to be influenced by other people's voices and stuff. But
right.
Do you read memoirs?
I do, but I've been reading just usually it's friends. I have friends who write books, and I just finished a memoir. The title escaped me right now, and I just finished it, which is kind of sad. But it's a good book by a guy named Joe Mackel, and he's a really good writer. He was a former professor. He taught university back in the Midwest, I think, for many years. Joe Mackel's book was very good. It's the most recent book, and I've read a couple of books actually. And then, one of my favorite books was a book called Autobiography of a Face by Lucy Greeley. And that's a really interesting story about a young girl who suffers a deformation when she gets cancer in their jaw, and she's just a child, and she has to, they've undergone operation after operation, and she's deformed. And really, it's about be blunt. It's about going through life ugly, being really ugly. Somebody that makes people look away from you. They don't want to look at you. Right. And what's that story like? She lived it, and it's a miraculous book, and wonderfully, powerfully, strangely uplifting in the end. So that book was a real knockout for me. But yeah, I've read different memoirs, and I've learned from them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So how can readers and viewers get a hold of you? What is your website? I'll go ahead and put it in there in the description, but if you want to tell us.
I think I should know it, right? It's jamesbrownauthor.com. So if you run all those words together, jamesbrownauthor.com, I should pop up.
All right. And are you on social media?
No, I gave up. Yeah, I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take it anymore. I got in one too many arguments on Facebook.
Oh, really?
I said, yeah. So I said, oh, this isn't worth it, because I was ranting and raving about what somebody had said, or all my friends have opinions they just want to share, and maybe I don't agree with them, and
right.
Yet they're my friends, so I don't want to say anything, and so I was learning things about my friends I didn't want to learn.
And that's the funny thing about social media, right? Is you start talking things, it's like, what?
Yeah, how could you say such a thing?
Yeah.
You think, I'm going to write him, and they think, no, I better not.
Right.
So I began to think less of people in general on social media. Right. So I just thought, I better get off of it, because it's actually hurting me. It's sucking up a lot of my time.
Right.
And I'm beginning to dislike a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Paula loves it.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I try to just focus on work, and I think when was it? Probably sometime last year. I just really got sick of everything, not just
Yeah.
the coronavirus, everything. I just didn't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
So I joined a marketing group, and one of their recommendations was unfriend all your friends. And because exactly that, it was like you just get into arguments, or you end up not liking people you did like.
Right. That's exactly right.
But only friend like just people within your industry. And it's like, I didn't unfriend my friends. I don't unfriend anybody, but but I
Yeah.
did become, I did join like writers groups and stuff on Facebook. And it's been a lot
Yeah.
nicer because now all the conversations are about books or about writing, and it's much nicer.
Good. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you could find a home there. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much. It's been really nice connecting with you again, and I'm so glad that you're doing well. And I loved your book.
Well,
So
thank you. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good one, and
Okay.
hopefully see you soon. Maybe see you on campus.
Sounds nice. All right. Okay.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good summer. Bye bye.
All right.